Hesiod of ancient Greece describes an ancient nuclear holocaust. This is not the first time we're being told about ancient nuclear events. We found certain type of glass in ancient Egypt, in ancient India, in ancient Santorini, ancient Crete. We even know that the throne room behind the Minoan palace in Eureka in Crete has a lead chamber. And why would they have a lead chamber, sealing a whole chamber with lead, unless they had it for purposes to protect themselves from nuclear disasters? So, what did Hesiod write concerning these ancient nuclear holocausts? In the text of the ancient peoples, there is a description of a terrible war that shook the whole earth, and this war, which may have been the cause of the beginning of the decline of that civilization, was waged with the use of sophisticated weapons. The descriptions of the ancient texts convey the image of a conflict which caused severe destruction. That age-old conflict probably resulted in a nuclear event, a nuclear holocaust. It seems extreme, but reading the descriptions of ancient traditions, one cannot help but think of such a possibility. Reference to a missile that shut down the power of the universe, to a white light glow, and an unprecedented fire that poured everywhere, to a deadly dust that covered those who survived the catastrophe, can hardly be let go unnoticed. Now, it's worth quoting the text of the peoples, in which, among other things, the reader can discern the great similarities that exist and draw his own conclusions. From the Theogony of Hesiod, where the description of that terrible war between the, quote, gods and the titans, end quote, is made, we transfer the following characteristic passage. The land and the sea were boiling endlessly, and the titans were engulfed in a hot breath. And as the flame went up in the sky, no matter how brave they were, the titans were blinded. They were blinded by the white light from the lightning. Heat, unprecedented fire was pouring everywhere, and what the eye saw and what the ears heard, it was as if heaven and earth were mixed together. End quote. Now, one researcher might well have suspected that the lightning of Jupiter, that is the lightning rod of Zeus, that was the weapon that gave the gods their victory over the Titans, was in fact nothing different from today's, what we call nuclear energy. Even more characteristic is the description in the Indian text Popol Vuh, Popolvux, the Indian text Popol Vuh, quote, an iron thunderbolt fell from heaven to earth. The corpses of the men of the tribe of Vrishnis and Anchika became unrecognizable. Their hair and nails had fallen out, and the birds' feathers had changed colors. The food had been poisoned, and those who survived the catastrophe had been covered in deadly dust. End quote. And the Indian Bible, the Mahabharata, states, as we know, there was an Indian, the similar kind of event in India and also in northern Africa. The Mahabharata states it was a missile that enclosed the power of the universe. It was a column of smoke and flame brilliant like 10,000 suns, rising with all its might. It was a new and unknown weapon, an iron thunderbolt that reduced the tribes of Vrishnis and Andakas to ashes. The bodies were burned and no one could recognize them. Hairs and nails fell from the bodies. The birds turned white. That means the feathers turned white. A few hours later, all the food was contaminated. To escape the fire, the soldiers fell into the rivers with their clothes and weapons. A hot wind started blowing. The universe was shrouded in heat as if it were sick with a high fever. The elephants and other war animals were struck by the force of the weapon. The waters became so hot that whatever lived inside them caught fire. A fatal spear like a stick of death. It measured 3 cubits and 6 feet, endowed with the power of lightning in the man with 1,000 eyes, devastating to all living creatures. End quote. Now, the striking resemblance between the descriptions of Voroi Vuh and Mahabharata, as well as the provocatively similar names of the tribes Vrishnis and Anchikas on the one hand and Vrishnis and Andakas on the other, lead us to the conclusion that these two texts describe the same event. In another part of the Mahabharata, we read about the collision in the air of two weapons from the ones mentioned above. These two weapons met each other in the middle of the air. Then the earth began to tremble along with all its mountains and seas and trees, and all living creatures were burned by the energy of the weapons and badly affected. The heavens were on fire, and the 10 points of the horizon were filled with smoke. The Old Testament describes the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, can also be described as a mythological depiction of the sufferings of that great war. And the Lord rained upon Sodom and Gomorrah fire from heaven and destroyed these cities and all that was around about them. Now, another interesting element that the ancient traditions convey to us is that of the construction of the famous lightning rod of Zeus by Cyclops. According to ancient Greek mythology, the Cyclops were the ones who created this invincible weapon, which they gave to Zeus and called it the lightning rod of Zeus in order to defeat the Titans. From the comments of Artemis, we read the opinion of Eratosthenes, who claimed that the conspiracy of the gods against the Titans took place in the altar, quote unquote, where the Cyclops made these terrible weapons. Quote, I had a cover over the fire so as not to see the lightning power, end quote. So are we talking here about an ancient nuclear plant, the walls of which protected its workers from lightning forces, and those scientists who would obviously wear a particular uniform with a helmet which gave them a different strange image, where they were named Cyclops by mythology? Who knows? Now, the case is quite bold, but also quite probable if one takes into account the above descriptions, as well as the 10,000-year-old rock paintings found in the cave of Tassili Valley on the edge of the Sahara Desert, which shows a figure of a man dressed in a strange uniform, strongly reminiscent of that of astronauts or workers in a nuclear plant. The helmet of the uniform reminds us of the description of a cyclops, as it is a round skylight on the forehead to allow vision by the one wearing it. This was from Nexus Magazine, Elino Pelagianisia, and on a Greek article I've translated for you. Please leave your comments, and thank you for your support. Finally, support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.